when I trained, I had a very traditional psychiatric nurse training back in the early 1990s. And you can sum my training up in 3 sentences, really. And those 3 sentences are these. First of all, the doctor is always right. Secondly, if you disagree with the doctor, don't worry, we will medicate you until you agree. And thirdly, if we can't get you to agree, we will label you as an uncooperative or personality disordered patient and we will exclude you from our service. I'll tell you what I think. I think it's arrogant because I don't think anybody's always right. And I don't care whether you're a doctor, a nurse, a social worker, an OT, support worker, doesn't matter. Nobody is always right. I think where we're going in services is a realisation that people are people and they have a right to be who they are, they have a right to disagree with us. So with that in mind, we did it in 3 groups, as we always do, 3 or 4 groups, in this case it was 3, because that's easier than everybody answering questions, but it's not a competition. So, let's see which group won. Right, first question. Mental illnesses are more difficult to cure than physical illnesses, survey said.
False.
False.
True and false.
True. Did you have a majority view?
True and false, huh?
False.
True and false.
True and false.
That was it. Both.
Okay. There's a what we call an additional question for this group. Can you spell pop out? Okay, right. Sheila's group, you said false. Yeah, absolutely right. It's false. The reason that's there is because there is this myth, and it's the thing that you get just in popular culture. There is this assumption: if you've got a mental disorder, that's it. That's you for life. You can't do anything about it. And we're all supposed to be scared of you as well. People who hear voices are mentally ill.
False.
Okay, everybody wins with that because depending on who you look at, some people who hear voices are very definitely mentally ill, but others are not. It's tough because a lot of people won't tell you because they're frightened that you'll think they're an axe-wielding murderer. But what we can say with reasonable certainty is the majority of voice hearers don't need any help with it at all, because they've got a way to deal with it. We'll talk a bit more about that as we go through it and how people deal with their experiences so they don't have a problem. So everybody wins with that one because depending on who you look at, because you're quite right, there are some people who hear voices who are in a terrible state, and it would be wrong to ignore that. That would do them great injustice. Anxiety is good for us.
True.
True. You're all saying true? Absolutely. Go on, can somebody tell me why? I agree with you, but can you tell me why?
It's
Caution.
It's our coping mechanism.
Yeah, absolutely. It's coping, it's caution, gets your adrenaline going, it's what makes you do stuff. I like to think of anxiety as a call to action. Wonderful. Everybody wins with that one. Depression is a normal human experience.
True.
We all saying true? Yeah, I'll go with that. Depending on how you define normal, and there are 2 ways people use normal as a word. The only point I want to make is that it's dead common, and it's not the end of the world, and it's treatable. And even if it's not treated, people get over depression. It's a rockier road without treatment. Alcohol causes depression.
I didn't tick anything.
Okay.
I didn't tick anything.
I thought you disagreed and not ticked anything. So
Well,
you wanted to prove it.
I wanted to put through, but everybody's opinion is different.
All right. How many people couldn't make their mind up? I mean, you've noticed everybody keeps winning whatever you've put because they are deliberately that way. One of the reasons for that is because if there was an obvious answer to any of these questions, you would have nothing to talk about. The exercise wouldn't work. So, like I said, I'm messing with your heads. But, yeah. The difference, I think, I'm going to talk to you about a thing called the stress and vulnerability model that emphasises this. The difference isn't to do with the nature of alcohol so much as with how vulnerable different people are to it. Some people can take a lot and some people can't. If you're vulnerable to alcohol, it will depress you. If you're not vulnerable to the effects of alcohol, or not as vulnerable, it may not depress you, or maybe you'll just need to drink an awful lot more than somebody else. Theoretically, everybody would get depressed if they drank enough alcohol.
I'll tell her that. She'll be pleased if I tell her that.
Well, yeah.
She's not drinking enough.
She's not drinking enough, yeah. That's not what I want you to take away from this training day. Deliberate self-harm is about attention seeking.
False.
You're all saying false?
Yes.
Great, I don't have to kick anybody. Which of these then are symptoms of depression? I'll just go through them and tell me what you think. So sleeplessness.
Yes.
You all saying yes?
Yes.
Okay. Dietary disturbance.
Yes.
Delusions.
Yes.
Yeah, could be, absolutely. We have a thing called psychotic depression, which can be very delusional. History of childhood abuse.
Yes.
Thank you. It's not a symptom. But I think everybody sort of said that, so everybody wins. It's a really important point, that. Just because something happened to you in the past does not mean that the outcome is inevitable. Put that another way, people get over stuff. Panic attacks. Really interesting, this one. Technically, theoretically, it shouldn't be, because anxiety, we'll talk about this in more detail, but anxiety is about arousal. It's when you get really excited and tense. And depression is the opposite, it's de-arousal. When you get really slow and lethargic. So they should be absolutely opposite ends of the spectrum, and never the two should meet. And then you get a thing called agitated depression, which has got bits of both in it. One of the things that we've learned over the last 100 years in mental health and in psychiatry is that jumping to conclusions is almost always the wrong thing to do. They really are opposite ends of the spectrum. If you're mad, you can have bipolar affective disorder, which is manic depression, but all that means is if that's mood, if that's sort of middling mood, most of us, we hover around the middle like that, and we get a bit happy and we get a bit sad, but that's as far as we go. People with bipolar disorder go from one pole, one extreme to the other, so they do that, but it's not possible to be both at the same time. That's your depressive phase, that's your manic phase. So mania is not a symptom of depression, it can't be. Right. Mental disorder is caused by chemical imbalance. Okay. Traumatic experience.
Yes.
Discrimination. What we've got there are evidence of the medical model, the psychological model, and the social model. They're all ways to explain mental disorder. And actually there's a lot to be said for each of them. We're going to pull them together later and talk about the stress and vulnerability model, which stops us having to flip from one explanation to another, because it just covers them all. It's a really nice way to think about mental health and mental disorder. Anyway, psychotic means, what did you get?
You're not in control of how you're feeling.
You're not in control of how you're feeling, okay? This group?
Mental breakdown.
Mental breakdown?
Not in a good place.
Not in a good place. So you're all equally vague then.
I thought you said you might be more at risk to yourself or members of the public.
Insanity is different from doing that sort of catastrophic stuff, really. But psychosis, which is what we're really saying, what psychotic means is if one or more of three types of symptoms, and these are hallucinations. You can write it down if you like, but you're going to get it all on handouts later. So hallucinations. Well, why not? You know, no point making it. Hallucinations, which is anything that you experience in your five senses. So it could be what you see, what you hear, what you touch, what you taste, what you smell. But other people don't share that experience. So one of the psychotic symptoms is hallucinations. Another one is a delusion, and the textbook view of that is a fixed, false belief, not amenable to reason. And then the third one, this is the not what you think, but how you think. It's called a thought disorder, and it's to do with the process of thinking. So, for example, some people, when they're sorting out their thoughts in their head and trying to turn it into words to speak, it all gets jumbled up. So you get all the right words. It's like Les Dawson playing the piano. You get all the right words, not necessarily in the right order. That's called word salad. It's a thought disorder. Does that make sense? Right, we're going to do them in more detail. We're only doing overview, but that is that's the definition of psychosis. It's one or more of hallucinations, delusions, and thought disorders. It's not axe-wielding murder. All right? Any questions, comments, or challenges about any of that? No? Well, we're just coming up to the break. There's one thing that I want to make clear to you before we have a break in about 5 minutes. I'm going to start by asking you a question, which is this. Who is the most important member of the mental health care team? Apart from the person, the individual who needs the of those who are helping that individual, who's the most important member?
A doctor.
You say the doctor?
I think the person that knows the best.
Right, person that knows them best? No, they're not all equal at all.
The psychiatrist?
Yeah.
No. I was just saying that. I thought about it.
It actually doesn't matter what that person's qualification is. What matters is, you were closest with knows them best. What matters is the person who is there. And there's loads of research that I'm not supposed to like, because I do all sorts of knobby stuff and I've got letters after me and stuff like that. But actually the reality is, if you look at the research, people like me aren't very important in the care team. It's the people who are there most of the time, and usually that means people like you. Don't let people devalue what you do, is the message, because you're the most important members of the team.